The privilege of welcoming Dr. Tim Riesenberger. He lives in Seattle, but I don't think you actually spend too much time there. He's a doctor, an emergency room doctor, trained at Loma Linda University and Stanford University, but it turns out that he decided that he preferred presenting and speaking to just being in the hospital. So what he does is he works a few shifts and then travels for a few weeks. And works a few more shifts and travels through. Is this accurate?
I fly about 400,000 kilometers.
400,000 kilometers of flying a year. He's visited and presented in 100 countries. And I brought him in to speak to some students at Walla Walla University. So we go a little ways back and have had some great times together. And I'm just excited to be able to welcome him to this corner of the world, a beautiful place called Kelowna, British Columbia. And we hope that this place has a special part of your heart from now on, amidst the plethora of other locations you visit. We're very excited to have you share with us about health and wellness tonight, as well as tomorrow night. Tonight he's talking about the secrets of longevity, and tomorrow evening, not at 7, at 5 p.m. tomorrow, he will be presenting a program titled Nutrition, Fact versus Fiction. That's very interesting to me because there are all sorts of diets and ideas and opinions and theories about what is good or bad to eat, and he's going to help us sort of work our way through that. And at the end of both tonight's and tomorrow's, there will be a question and answer time. So be thinking if you have questions, there will be opportunities for those to be answered. So just join me in welcoming Dr. Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, no problem. All right. Good evening. How are you? I am very thankful to be here. Rob is an awesome guy. We've worked together for several years now. I know his dad. I don't think I ever got to meet your grandfather, but I did meet your dad, I think, at one point. And he's an amazing guy. He comes from a great legacy of service. And that's why we're here. We want to share what we do in a way that will help you. And I want you to know I like interaction. I may ask some questions. I may get welcome comments. But at the end, I will take specific questions from the audience. And also, if you feel like, hey, you know, I don't want to share in front of everybody, that's okay. I will stay. If you want to catch me at the door, you can chat. If you want to catch me privately, that's fine too. And I'll also do that at the end of tomorrow's presentation at 5 p.m. So if you feel like there's something you're a little bit less comfortable sharing with everybody, I'm happy to stay as long as you want. Well, probably within reason, since I think my host probably wouldn't enjoy me coming back at midnight tonight. But I believe that this is something that affects all of us. And I wanted to thank Rob for his introduction because people are interested. Even on the flight over here, I had this guy ask me about the paleo diet, asking me about cancer, all kinds of stuff. We all are interested in not just a longer quantity of life, but a quality of life. And this is not anything new. Ponce de Leon actually searched for the physical fountain of youth many hundreds of years ago, and he never even found it, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean we've stopped looking. We just look in different ways, as I say. Despite the economic downturn of 2008, my plastic surgery colleagues saw no decrease in their income, even though they are cash only, no insurance. So how is that possible that people still had money for plastic surgery? And some people might say, well, you know, I would never go under the knife to look younger. Well, but would you use Botox? Would you get a little injection to take away the wrinkles? Well, maybe you wouldn't do that. But do you dye your hair? Right? Maybe you do. Maybe you do. Or maybe use a little, you know, makeup or foundation or something like that. Smooth away the ears a little bit. And people are saying, well, maybe that's all vanity. I don't think it's entirely vain. I think that there's something in all cultures, in all people. And in case you're a guy saying, I don't do any of that stuff, you know, guys use just as many supplements. You know, we're all looking for that special food or that vitamin to help us go longer, stronger, fitter, right? We want back that youthful vigor we once had. And that is true for all people. We try desperately to avoid the progression of aging. We try desperately to avoid the inevitable. Now, what's very interesting is when you look at the human brain, we have some hope. The human brain, interestingly enough, is very, very redundant in many ways. And what I mean by that is that by the time someone has reached the average lifespan, it's about 79 years for North America. Can everyone see me if I come down here? I like being down here a little bit more. I want to be close to you, right? They have only filled about 5% of their brain. Does that seem strange to you? Why in the world so little? In fact, there's a lot of redundancy. Someone can actually lose half their brain and live a normal life. Dr. Ben Carson, one of my colleagues and mentors, is a neurosurgeon, and he perfected the hemispherectomy for seizures. Half of your brain gone, still survive? Unbelievable. When you think about this, even the most accomplished geniuses of our race only fill about 8% of their whole brain. That intrigues me. Why in the world would you have that kind of capacity when the very smartest of all of us don't use up all the memory, so to speak? The hard drive still has plenty of room, plenty of room. Could it be that you were designed to live longer than 79 years? Could it be that you were designed to live forever? Well, these individuals do not live forever, but I'm going to share with you the blue zones. Does anyone know what I'm talking about when I say the blue zones? Yeah, a few of you. The blue zones are areas of individuals. They could be geographical areas, racial areas, groups of people that are somehow characterized by longer life than the rest of us. These blue zones are not found in any particular geography only. They're spread throughout the world. And perhaps some of you saw this issue of National Geographic. National Geographic looked at 3 of the blue zones. There are more. These are the Sardinians, the Okinawans, and a mystery group that I'll share later. But there's other groups as well. There's the Hunzas of Europe. Costa Rica has a little blue zone there as well. And they try to figure out, well, why do these people live so long? Well, let's take a look. In Okinawa, Japan, this is an archipelago in the south portion of Japan. It's not all of Japan that has this, but Okinawa, for some reason, lives a lot longer. Okinawans live an average of about 82 years. Now, that may not seem very impressive to you, since our average is 79, but from a statistical standpoint, that is tremendous. When they look at why they live so much longer, they have only 1/5 of the number 1 killer, which is heart disease. By the way, heart disease is the number 1 killer now, not just in the first world, but in the third world. Did you know that? It used to be malaria, tuberculosis, diarrheal illnesses, malnutrition, but that's gone now. Not entirely, but it's gone as the number 1 killer. So in even third world countries now, overall, heart disease is still the number 1 killer on planet Earth. Also, the Okinawans have a lot less breast and prostate cancer, which afflicts many of us, even many of our friends. Breast and prostate cancer are definitely ones that affect a lot of individuals. It may not be as fatal as some of the other cancers, like I'm going to fall over this table. Okay. The individuals in Okinawa have several factors that seem to contribute to their longevity, but it's not merely a physical phenomena. Yes, they have generally a plant-based diet, but they have something called ikigai. Ikigai is roughly translated as the reason you get up in the morning. Purpose, your motto, your theme. For Fumiyasu at 84, his ikigai is the Senior Olympics. His favorite event, the pole vault. Any pole vaulters out here? I thought not. Oh, wow. I saw a hand go up there. I would be impressed. But at 84, if he's doing that, what's your excuse, right? They also tend to grow their own food, but even though they eat more actual food, they weigh less. And why is that? Because the foods that they eat are very low in caloric density. They're eating a lot of fresh produce. They're eating a lot of miso soups, tofu, veggies, things like that. For Serie Toguchi, he is enjoying several natural remedies in this photo. He is enjoying rest. He is enjoying fresh air outside. He is enjoying the physical labor he's had from his garden. He's enjoying the produce from his garden. And last but not least, any other remedy you can think of he's getting there? Vitamin D, very big in the medical literature. Huge, huge, huge implications of what it is. Sorry? Yes, he's getting some fresh air, absolutely. You're absolutely right. What they've found now is that vitamin D actually isn't even a vitamin. They're going to reclassify it as a steroid. Did you know that? It's that powerful. The other question I thought that was funny, this was just part of the article itself, but the interviewer asked Mr. Toguchi, he said, Mr. Toguchi, what's with the red gloves? Is that part of it? He's like, well, they're easy to find. A moai is also part of Okinawan culture, and that is people who go through life together and help each other. We are not designed to be the independent atoms that we typically are in the West. This moai doesn't necessarily have to be relatives. It can be people that are just close buddies. But the key is they meet together 3 times a week or more. This group not only helps each other, socially, but financially, spiritually, in other ways. Anyone have a group of people they see at least 3 times a week on a regular basis? Well, there you go. There you go. That's helpful. Now, it's not just work. It has to be outside of work. It has to be outside of work. It has to be a group where you're actually supporting one another in a non-work setting, in a social sort of setting. That's why a lot of people go to a bar, right? They're missing this, missing this. Unfortunately, Okinawa is losing its longevity edge. Okinawa now has the highest rate of obesity in all of Japan, and the reason for that is none other than the downfall of all civilization, the Golden Arches. I think the only things here are maybe the tomato, the lettuce, I don't know, maybe the sesame seeds are good for you, but that's about it. Now our next blue zone is Silanus, on an island called Sardinia. Anyone know where we are? What country? Italy. You have to say Italy when you say it, right? Italy, right? So this village called Silanus is world famous for longevity. They are very much into the family. The entire family, both immediate and extended, come together every week for a meal. How many of you see every single one of your relatives once a week and have a meal? Maybe once a year at a family reunion, I don't know, but that's incredible here. The other phenomena that's amazing is that typically, who lives longer, men or women? Women, right? But not in Sardinia. If you're in Sardinia, in this village, men live to 100 just as much as women. Pretty amazing. The theory is that men have less stress in this society because women take on a lot more responsibility. Maybe I should move to Sardinia. No, just kidding. Also, they have a very active and outdoor life. Some people say that them being an isolated island does help them as well, because that's a genetic incubator, and I'll explain what that is in just a little bit. However, I believe that it's not merely the physical parameters that helps them. It is this, their thinking. Watch this. This is Giuseppe. He's 85 years old. Hopefully he's not going to eat what he's holding right there, because that will shorten his longevity. But the interviewer asked him and said, Giuseppe, you are still working a full day every day 20 years after most people are retired. Don't you ever feel tired? He's like, of course, I feel tired all the time. He's like, well, don't you ever feel like you should stay home and rest? And his answer to the interviewer was, If I stayed home all day, then I would be sick. A little kind of reversal of our philosophy, isn't it? If I stayed home all day, then I would be sick. I believe that in most first world countries, at least, a lot more of us rust out rather than burn out. Think about that. Also in Sardinia, they have found that the components of the soil are different than the Italian mainland. They have found that their grapes have about 300% of the quercetin and resveratrol. These are powerful antioxidants found in red and white grapes that resist heart disease, the number one killer. They think that may be the component. Also, the fact that they are a genetic incubator, meaning if you take DNA samples from all the inhabitants of this village, 80% of them are related to the initial inhabitants, right? The concept is you tend to marry people on the island. Does that make sense? So you have the same sort of gene pool. So the criticism of Sardinians is that perhaps the founders of this island just had gene sequences that were very, very much promoting longevity, right? So that's the theory as to why this may not be a real effect, but it may be a genetic effect. Unfortunately, Sardinia is also losing their longevity edge. Obesity now affects 10% of them. Now, to just give you a reference, in my country, I'm from the United States, the obesity rate is 36%. For you guys, it depends on the province. Newfoundland is not great as far as obesity. There are other parts that are not horrific in your country. It varies by province. Some are worse, some are better. The rate of obesity is also very much followed by the rate of diabetes, which is related to that. The criticism also of Silanus is that it's only 2,400 people, and really, can you make conclusions about such a small, as we say, sample size in science? We need more power to the study. We need more than just that. So our next group is actually about 20 million individuals, so it's plenty of power for any statistical analyses you want to do. But the question is that what about the person who doesn't have high antioxidant grapes, right? Or someone who doesn't live on an island, someone who doesn't have their own garden, someone who doesn't have long-lived relatives, someone who doesn't live in the countryside and breathe a bunch of fresh air, right? Although I'd say Kelowna is kind of the country, wouldn't you say? I would say smaller city. But you may ask, do you have a chance of living to 100? Well, our next group should give you hope, because they are actually in the worst metropolitan area for air quality of pretty much the entire world. Not quite the entire world. Mexico City is pretty bad. Different parts of China are pretty bad. As you know, your parents are there. But this is a group of happy and healthy seniors who many live much longer than 100. And this is one of their champions, Marge Deton. That picture is taken of her on her 100th birthday. And she renewed her driver's license for another 5 years. I'm certain she's not having any of this to help her longevity. But the point is that here she is in the city living that long. She is not in the countryside. She's not on an island. She is in smoggy Southern California. And as far as strength, if you think these seniors are weak, look at Dr. Frank Shearer as the oldest water skier on the planet at age 100, still kicking up the spray. And the amazing thing is, even though he's in a very stressful sort of profession, he still is living a long time. He's outlived the average MD by several decades. How did he do that? Who is this group? This is one of my professors in medical school, Dr. Ellsworth Wareham, cardiac surgeon, in this picture, 91 years old. A lot of people say, I'm not letting him operate on me, right? But I can assure you, I actually rotated with Dr. Wareham, and his hands were rock steady. The surgeons loved to have him in the operating room because there was no complication that he hadn't seen. He had been practicing medicine and actually doing surgery for longer than most of us have been alive. And he was ready for any situation. Very, very competent physician, still doing surgery at age 91. As many of you already know, I am speaking of none other than the Seventh-day Adventists. The Seventh-day Adventists are not a large religion as far as world religions go. The larger world religions would be Catholicism, right? Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. Those are larger world religions. Seventh-day Adventists at 20 million are not very large, but they do live a long time. Here, Lydia Newton is among the 20 people at the time of the article living on the face of the earth at the time. The article said, was it good genes? Is it divine intervention? And the author says God may or may not have something to do with it, but their religion does. So the neat thing about the Seventh-day Adventist Blue Zone is that it's not a zone. It is a group of people. It's not limited to an area. So not all of us can live in Hawaii or someplace really sunny and nice and tropical, but you can get the benefits of longevity. This group of individuals is not small. Like I said, it's about 20 million, but that's really small compared to world religions. They're about the same size as Judaism or Jainism, Sikh. Anyone know a Sikh? Yep. About the basically people who wear the turbans. Their last name is Kaur if you're a female, right? And the last name is Singh if you're a man. If you know someone whose name is Singh, S-I-N-G-H, right? They're Sikh. So you can pretty much guarantee yourself that. They're vegetarian, by the way, vegan most of the time. So about the same size as those religions, not super large. But many, the key here is many are not in the country. They're in metropolitan areas. They're not isolated. They come from all races, right, which is a benefit for people wanting to look at, say, hey, can I live that long too? But their common bond is their religion and lifestyle. So if you take all three of these groups, they basically have plant-based diets. They don't smoke or drink generally. They're very family-oriented. They have daily physical activity. Newsweek. Anyone heard of Newsweek? Sure, right? Here is the flow chart for living forever. I think it's very intriguing that the second step here is you are Seventh-day Adventist. And just for full disclosure, I just want to let you know that red arrow is not in the article. I added that. My graphic designer actually added that. But I think it's very funny that some other things are up here. Yes, you're optimistic, etc. There are some genetic factors. No air pollution. Here's one that intrigued me. You started formal schooling after age 6. That's not talking about learning. That's not talking about anything mental. That means you live longer, right? Don't put your kids in school too early, right? It's bad for them from a physical standpoint. How about U.S. News and World Report's secrets to live to 100? Not just quantity, but quality. Number 1, those who retire expire. Don't do that. Don't retire. Now, I'm going to just share a personal experience. I have many individuals in my line of work who are elderly. I work with a lot of geriatric populations. But they're not all necessarily ill. One population is sick, my patients, right? The other geriatric population I work with is pushing them around on the gurneys, my volunteers. The same age, but better health. Why is that? Well, they have ikigai, right? They have a purpose. They are serving others. Even though they are long retired, they continue to use their skills and talents to benefit their fellow man. And there is health and strength and power in that. In fact, December 2016, just 3 months ago, this is the Berlin Aging Study in the Journal of Evolution and Human Behavior. They saw a protective longevity effect up to a 30% reduction to 40% reduction in mortality if you were a grandparent and you took care of your grandkids part-time. Any grandparents here? All right. Do you sometimes watch your grandkids? Start doing it. Wow, but Grandma and Grandpa, really? You want to take care of them? Yes. You'll have to pay them to do it, right? It'll definitely benefit you. But I find this very intriguing, even though this was in the Journal of Human Evolution, and they tried to put out and say, well, this is because of the protecting the gene sequences, the reproductive, etc. But I thought what was very funny on that is they disclosed that even if you were not related and you cared for these grandkids, you got the longevity benefit. Also, they found that even individuals without children who did the caretaking also got the benefit. I'd like to hear the evolutionary explanation to that, because there's not one, right? It's the fact that you're built to help other people. You're built to serve. You're built to continue utilizing your talents, even though you're retired, quote unquote. Number 2 was a new one to me. How would flossing increase your longevity? Any thoughts? Anyone? Heart disease. Who said that? Wow. There is a very strong correlation, yes. Now, how would that work? How would not flossing cause heart disease? What? Bacteria. So I will share with you a very simplistic illustration. When you haven't flossed for a while, and then you floss, what happens? You bleed. Now, I want you to know that that piece of floss that you just put in there didn't cause the inflammation. It was already inflamed. You just saw it at that moment. And when your gums are inflamed, when they have gingivitis, and you look at the fact that your mouth is one of the dirtiest places on your body, right? That bacteria can penetrate into the bloodstream. Some of them set up shop and can cause inflammation in the coronary arteries, cause plaque to lay down there, et cetera, et cetera. You get enough plaque, blocks it off, you have a heart attack, right? That's how it works. What's very interesting is if you look at the principal investigators of the floss studies, they believe that flossing twice a day actually is what you need to do, even though currently it's once a day. They believe that it didn't come out that twice a day helped you anymore because they didn't have enough power in their study. They believe that. So flossing, I like flossing because it is very, how would I say it, universal, right? How much does floss cost? $1? I don't know, less than $1? How long does it take you to teach someone to floss? Right? 5 minutes? Maybe even less than that. I don't know. How long do your hygienists take? Probably 3 minutes or less than that. And it is available to all, right? Except if you have dentures, I suppose it doesn't help you. But my thought is that is amazing that is something available to the most educated and the most ignorant. Whatever country you're in, right? You can get a piece of celery and probably do it, or grab the string out of your sock or something, I don't know. But if you're really poor, you could probably make do, right? Number 3, if you look at meta-analyses on exercise, a meta-analysis is a study that combines hundreds of other studies, right? So it combines hundreds of other studies and it says, okay, this is the summary of all these other studies. It can also be things like a monograph. Anyone heard the monograph from the World Health Organization, October 2015? See the Time magazine article? Big 2 pieces of bacon and an X. The war on delicious, right? Did you see that one? Basically, the World Health Organization said, red meat is cancerous. I'm like, really? I had have told you that, right? But I thought that was very intriguing. But they took hundreds of studies, like 500 studies, right? Boiled it down to, yeah, don't eat red meat. In fact, if you eat processed meat, it's like even worse. So that's basically what they said. But a meta-analysis on exercise, what it basically reveals is that for every hour that you exercise, of almost any type, you will live that hour over again and another 2 or 3 hours on top of that. How many of you get 400% return on your investments? If you do, talk to me after the seminar because I want to talk to you. But that is exercise, right? You can actually benefit yourself by doing something like exercise. That's simple. And people will often say, well, what should I do? Right? How often should I exercise? They used to say an hour a day, 3 times a week. They no longer believe that because they took that same 3 hours and then they divide it into 4 times a week. What about 3 times a week versus 4 times a week? Which group lived longer? What do you think? 4. Okay, 4 times a week versus 5 times a week. Same amount of time, still 3 hours, the 5 times a week. That's correct. Now we get from 5 times a week to 6 times a week. Now remember, the 6 times a week is only 30 minutes a day. You're only doing 30 minutes a day at this point. Was there a difference in longevity, yes or no? Who had the longer lifespan? 6 times a week. Then they went from 6 times a week and they looked at 7 times a week. Which one was better? There was no difference. That's right. It stopped at 6. 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. I find that intriguing. Very intriguing. Because that is solid data. There's proof. That's proof that shows that, right? So if you can exercise, try to do some every day. Try not to be the weekend warrior, right, as we say, where you get all your exercise, on the Saturday and Sunday and do nothing during the week. Even if you're just doing 30 minutes, right? Even if you when you drive to the store, right, you spend 5 minutes just driving around for that parking space. Just park and walk to the store, right? Don't push the elevator button to go down 1 floor. Take the stairs, right? Have an activity, a lifestyle activity, just a mindset of staying active, and you will. Do the best you can to move as much as possible. To give you kind of some examples of negative meta-analyses, it's like cigarette smoking. Every cigarette you smoke, 10 minutes off your life. Every hour of television you watch, this is an Australian study, every hour of television that you watch after age 25 shortens your lifespan by 22.8 minutes. There's a reason they call it the boob tube, right? Don't watch TV. Don't watch TV. And usually, what are you watching on TV? Is it beneficial? Usually not, right? Number 4, what's the most important meal of the day? Breakfast, of course, we all know that. But did you know you actually have to have a fiber-rich breakfast? Now, how does that work? Well, when you have a fiber-rich breakfast, like whole grains, you regulate your blood sugar not only for that meal, but for that entire day. And because of that, you live longer. Better glycemic control means less heart disease, better metabolic profiles, and longer life. So breakfast is not only an important meal a day just to break the fast, but to get that longevity benefit. How many people here sleep at least 6 or more hours a night? Well, that's good. Most people, thank God. But it's not just quantity, it's quality they're finding. What they have found is if you sleep, you have many hormones that repair you, right? Growth hormone, serotonin, melatonin, cortisol. Those are all related to your sleep-wake cycle, your circadian rhythm, if you will, right? When you look at that, they have found that when you sleep earlier, you get more of those beneficial hormones. More bang for your buck, so to speak. And where do you think the more beneficial sleep is found? Yes, before midnight. That's correct. I find that very intriguing. Very intriguing. But it makes sense, right? Before artificial lighting, when do you think people went to bed? Right? Unless you wanted to burn all your oil and your torches and be a poor man, right? You go to sleep when it's dark, right? And you get up when it's light, or when it started to get light, right? Very, very important. Many times, seniors don't get as much sleep. You can take a nap. It's okay. I give you permission, right, to take that nap. Eat whole foods. I hope that's not a surprise to any of you, but the article said that when you look at supplementation meaning like a vitamin, things like that, right? They looked at things like a Finnish study that looked at smokers. Smokers are going to get more what? Lung cancer, right? The other things too, emphysema, COPD, heart disease, many other cancers. But they followed these smokers to see them develop lung cancer. And of course, they did, right, if they smoked, but all three of the groups smoked. First group was the control group, so they just smoked, they didn't do anything else. Second group smoked, but ate high antioxidant foods, vitamins A, C, E, and selenium. ACEs, very easy to remember, ACEs, right? Vitamin A, these people ate a bunch of carrots. They ate vitamin C, like citrus fruits, right? Vitamin E, whole grains. Selenium? Where's selenium from? Yeah, Brazil nuts. Who said that? That's funny. Wow, very good. So there is the third group who ate the same amount of antioxidant nutrients, but in the form of supplements, pills. And they followed these three groups. The control group, what do you think they developed? Lung cancer, sure. And the food group who smoked but also ate the antioxidant foods, what do you think? Less cancer, more cancer, same? Less. The supplement group who got all the vitamin A and C and E and smoked, they got actually more cancer. It was a surprise. They actually had to stop the study partway through because, I mean, if any of you are researchers, you have to go to an IRB, a board, you have to get the ethics to approve your study. And if it's dealing with death or disease and you discover a significant difference, you have to unblind the study and tell people, right? So they had to tell everybody, don't smoke, right? Not new news. But the people that were on the vitamins, they had to tell them, don't take those supplements, eat the carrots, eat the orange, eat the seeds and the nuts and the Brazil nuts. They had to tell them that. Because that's very interesting. And I'm not saying that all data shows that supplements are evil, but I think the concept is very important that there are interactions in vitamins and minerals, right? For example, if you look at a common supplement that women use, that's iron. But if you supplement with iron, your zinc absorption goes down. Did you know that? If you supplement with zinc, your copper absorption goes down, right? So you're playing this juggling game instead of just eating whole foods and allowing it to be in balance. Does that make sense? If you do want to supplement, my personal recommendation is get a good juicer because you're at least keeping all the ratios the same with the exception of what? What do you lose when you juice? Fiber, right? Do you need fiber? Yes, you do. Talk to somebody who's not had a bowel movement for a week and ask them if they need fiber. Yes, they will say yes. So if you look at eating whole foods, they've found that not only is that important, but did you know when you eat the food is also important? What would you suppose is the most nutritious way to eat the food? Right what? After you pick it, right? You know, they've done studies and shown that especially lettuce and things that like spoil rapidly, those things lose 30% of their nutrition in just 2 weeks. Did you know that? How much of the produce do you think is 2 weeks old in the store? Someone said all of it. I hope it's not that bad. But this is the way you should eat it, right? Right? Maybe wash off the bug a little bit or something like that. But that's the concept, right? The food isn't getting anything else once you pick it. Does that make sense? It can only go down, unless it's ripening, of course. Does that make sense? You're not getting anything more once it's cut off from the vine or the tree or whatever you're doing, right? So eat whole foods and preferably eat local. Does that make sense? Because if you're eating something local, it's probably fresher. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying it's evil if you eat a banana from Ecuador or something like that, okay? I'm not saying that that's wrong. But in general, food tends to be less nutritious as time goes on. But I hope that that's logical, right, to you, right? Number 7, my personal favorite, it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you, right? I believe that 9 out of 10 illnesses start here. And they're discovering that now in the scientific literature. There's a field, for those of you who are academics or health professionals, called psychoneuroimmunology. What that's looking at is how your thoughts and your feelings affect your immune system. And they're looking at data from pregnant mothers. And they're finding that merely the thoughts and emotions of the mother affect the child. Did you know that? And they're not sure what it is. It's not a hormonal effect. It's not a neuronal effect. They don't know what's going on. But the baby is affected by the health of the mother. And I know that Rob was very nice to Bethany, right, while she was pregnant. Of course, right? That's why Eliza, right? Eliza is so happy. She delivered you a little nutrition on that picture I saw on Facebook. Kind of secondhand nutrition, right? The badge of fatherhood. So number 7, I want to look at number 7. There is a personality that lives shorter. Type A personalities tend to live less. Now, why do you suppose that is? Yeah, on the move. These people are usually stressed out, right? They're very punctual. They're big organizers. They're kind of controlling things around them. But did you know that there's only 2 characteristics of type A personality that killed them? They isolated it. Any thoughts as to what those traits are? Type A personality. Number 1, hostility. Number 2, what do you think? Intolerance. Yeah, hostility is anger. So the concept is if you lose your temper just for a second, did you know that? You just snap for a second and then you recover. Your risk of fatal heart attack goes up 300% for the next several hours. Did you know that? You're not designed for those emotions. You're not designed for anger, bitterness, jealousy, guilt, shame, right? Did you know that bitterness is the poison that you drink thinking it will kill someone else? I'm serious. I know people who are bitter at dead people. It's not hurting the dead person. They're dead, right? But do you think it hurts them? Of course it does, right? That's not what you're designed for. And when we look at those negative emotions, negative personality traits, not only are they decreasing the quality of our life, they are shortening your life itself. So resolve those things, right? Come to the events of dealing with depression, stress, etc. that we're going to have. Number 8, I have to make a confession. The article did not say, in U.S. News World, it did not say be a Seventh-day Adventist. It just said live like a Seventh-day Adventist. But you know, it's all right. You can be a Seventh-day Adventist. That's fine, right? This one says B. This one says B. Hey, why not make the 8th one say B, right? It's a small religion, right? There's plenty of room. So they found that Seventh-day Adventists, when they were studied with their age-matched control, right? So when you compare populations, you have to take the Seventh-day Adventist who's 89 versus the regular person who's 89. They got to live in the same area. They got to have the same level of education. If one is a diabetic, the other has a diabetic. If one is white, the other has to be white, right? Does that make sense? You have to actually match them up with all the other parameters and only let the religion be different. Does that make sense? That's how you do data analysis, studies, research, right? The same age-matched control Seventh-day Adventists, general population, 79. Seventh-day Adventists, 89. Who remembers how much longer the Okinawans lived on average? 3 years. This is 10 years. If I had an invention, a supplement, hey, it could be a beanie that you wore on your head and you had to spin 5 times a day. If I had something like that, and I would guarantee you, on average, 10 extra years, I would be a billionaire overnight. I would be viewed as the savior of humankind. To increase the average lifespan by 10 years, unbelievable. I can tell you this, whether or not you believe in the religious aspects of it, the data doesn't lie. It is what it is. What is giving those 10 years? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Number 9, ever noticed that your grandma, whenever you told her, hey, Grandma, we're going to be going out, we'll be back later for supper, Now supper's at 5:30. No, we're probably not going to back till 7. Supper's at 5:30. Right? You know, older people don't like you messing with the program, right? We're going to sit down and eat right now. Okay, now time for everybody to sleep, right? Don't mess with the schedule. The reason why that's very important is because that's what's keeping them alive. There's actually been research shown that if you get up, go to sleep, eat, exercise at the same time, you live longer. Also, if you drink some water while you're speaking, it doesn't hurt either. So don't mess with the program, right? Be a creature of habit, right? Don't fly 15 time zones a month like me, right? And people say, oh, but you know, you're protected by that and whatever. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm tired just like everyone else. But I can tell you this. Even though it is harmful, I'm willing to give up some of my longevity to increase yours, okay? And that's true. It's not even a joke. When they looked at heart attacks, this is the United States, so forgive me, most of the data I'm aware of is from my country. But here's the concept. When they examined fatal heart attacks, they saw a spike in the fall and a spike in the spring. But then they reanalyzed the data, and they found that wasn't true in the state of Arizona or half of the state of Indiana. What was it? Spring forward, fall back? Some people tried to argue, and they said, well, it's because the person lost an hour of sleep. And I said, that doesn't explain the fall back. Does that make sense? That doesn't explain the same spike in mortality in the fall. Now, the data and the literature has been very clear for many, many years that auto accidents go up around those times. Have you noticed that you don't feel normal for several weeks after the time change? It's like, what? And guess what we have this weekend? Death. No, I'm serious. This is shown in the American Journal of Cardiology, 2013, not that long ago. They show an increase in death from the time change. And how many hours is that? 1. I just came back from Lisbon, which is 8 hours different. No, just kidding. But seriously, it does make a difference if you maintain the same schedule. And if you deviate by an hour, you're hurting yourself. So keep that in mind. People say, well, what do I do with the time change? I say prepare for it ahead of time. Right? Shift your schedule to that time zone gradually. Does that make sense? And people say, well, how long should I prepare? I said, if you were to walk to the next time zone, how long would that take you? How much can you walk in a day? 20 miles, maybe, at the most? So try to prepare like a month or so in advance. Does that make sense? To actually walk to the next time zone, or even gallop like in a horse, right, to the next time zone. The reason why we get dinged by the change in time is because we're changing those time zones rapidly. We travel in a plane, right? Sometimes you can arrive before you left. Have you ever had that happen to you? That's just because of the date line, not really the time zone phenomenon. But that's very important. To be a creature of habits, to have a regular schedule, very, very important for us. Number 10, remember the Moai, very important to stay connected, not merely just to your family, but to a group of people that support you and encourage you. It can be your family, but in this day and age of everyone doing their own thing, it's become less fashionable to be connected. They've found that if you maintain a close relationship with your sister, you actually have less incidence of depression. 2 sisters right here, yeah? All right. Be nice to Katie. She will be nice to you, at least I hope she is, and she'll keep you living longer. So that's the concept. I don't know why the data didn't work out for brothers, but I'm just telling you that's how it worked out. Maybe men are less empathetic, maybe we listen less, I don't know what that is, but be nice to your sister, maintain a close relationship with her, and you'll live longer. Number 11, was the longest prospective study, which means forward-looking study, in the history of mankind. They looked at personality traits of children and followed them for 70 to 80 years to see what trait led to longevity. And the trait that overpowered all others was conscientiousness. Anyone heard of the conscientious objector? Yeah. What does the word conscientious mean? Well, they thought in the study, there's actually a book written on the study, they thought that it was related to being conscientious to keep your doctor's appointments. Honestly, I don't give myself that much credit, you know. I believe that conscientiousness is more following through, not cutting corners, right? If you say, hey, I'm going to do this every day, you do it every day, right? It also has to do with saying what you mean and meaning what you say, conscientious. It's almost a moral trait, if that makes sense. So that was related not just to longevity, but the study found it was related to academic success, to marital satisfaction, to less jail time, if you can believe that. So be conscientious. It's not just good for the society around you, but good for you and your longevity. So all of these articles, all of these magazines, what are they all saying? Some people at this point, they say, well, what's the secret, right? Tell me what the secret is. Is it diet? Being vegetarian or vegan, right? Or paleo or whatever it is. And what I will say to this is, yes, certainly plant-based diets are superior. However, there is a limit to that. There's another world religion that's vegetarian, much larger than any of the groups we looked at. Anyone know? Muslims aren't vegetarian. They eat halal, but they're not vegetarian. No, not. He said Muslim, you said Islam. They're the same. Buddhists. Yes. Did you know that Buddhist monks are vegan? You probably knew that because you're from China. So, yeah. Some of them, not all of them. Also, Hindus, right? Many of them are vegetarians. Sikhs, also vegetarians. But you know what? They don't live longer. The data's not there, right? The data's not there. So could it be, also, this is what's very interesting, is in the Adventist Health Study, did you know that not all North American Adventists are vegetarian? In fact, the latest Adventist Health Study shows 39% vegetarian. It is. It's the lowest it's ever been since the study on the Seventh-day Adventists began. They are at the lowest point of their commitment of all time. However, they are the only blue zone that is not losing their longevity edge. Interesting. Why is that? That is a presentation on epigenetics, which is not going to be this weekend. Maybe next time, right? However, what I find very intriguing is when you look at the Adventist Health Study, did you know the meat-eating Seventh-day Adventists still live longer? I find that intriguing. Now, they don't live to 10 years, but it's more like 7. But I find that's very intriguing. So it's not just diet. What about exercise? Anyone know who Jim Fixx was? Who knows who Jim Fixx was? Yeah, big runner, right? Got the running craze into the United States. But then what happened to him? He had a heart attack, dropped over dead. So it's not just exercise. You need to actually take care of all aspects of health. Exercise is only one aspect. Diet is only one aspect, right? We have fresh air, sunshine, temperance, rest, trust in divine power. What about genetics, right? Maybe it's all in your genes. The reason why I don't think it's all genetic is that the last blue zone was not genetically related or culturally related. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is a what we call heterogeneous population, meaning it's a lot of different people. What I find intriguing is also what they say about, well, you know, the Seventh-day Adventists, they don't smoke, drink, or drink caffeine. Well, first of all, many of us do drink caffeine now, unfortunately, according to the Adventist Health Study. But there is another religious denomination that doesn't smoke, drink, or use caffeine. Who is it? The Mormons, that's correct. But they don't live longer, right? They're not on Anderson Cooper. They're not on Oprah Winfrey. They're not in National Geographic. They're not there because the data's not there, right? It's just that simple. It's not that people like Adventists or dislike Mormons. It has nothing to do with that. It's just not reality. However, in the spirit of full disclosure, for those of you who are researchers, the researcher for the Mormon religion, who's not a Mormon, by the way, his name is Bigelow, and he's out of UCLA. So you can look at him, and he has shown some advantages for Mormonism, and the largest advantage is if you are a white, male, high priest in their religion, you live 15 years longer. But that's not newsworthy, right? How many of us are white, male, and high priests? I don't even know what that is completely, honestly. But it is what it is. That's the data, right? What I'd like to see is something that is over all people groups. The interesting thing about African Americans in my country is that they have a much higher incidence of diabetes and hypertension. But when those African Americans become Seventh-day Adventists, that is eliminated. Did you know that? Very interesting. I find that very intriguing. And of course, some people may say, well, you know, it's optimism, like the placebo effect, right? You believe, you're happy. And certainly I think that is helpful. But it doesn't matter if you are completely optimistic. There can still be disease in your life. Anyone know what the silent killer is? Silent killer is hypertension, right? High blood pressure. No symptoms, typically. Notoriously no symptoms. Diabetes has very few symptoms too. And finally, you know, is it faith? Is it just religion itself? Does that give you a benefit? Well, let me give you another example. Who knows who the Amish are? The Amish, right? The people who are riding the buggies, right? The hat, right? No cell phones, right? Those, no technology, right? Well, the Amish I'm talking about. The Amish are a little larger group. So the data is very clear that the Amish have much less cancer than the general population. And I hope that that's not too much a surprise to you, right? They don't smoke, they don't drink, they're generally monogamous except for Rumspringa, unless you guys know what that is. That's during adolescence, they're allowed to kind of cut loose sort of thing and kind of do whatever they want and then decide if they want to be Amish or not, right? So generally they're monogamous, right? I'd say the vast majority of them are monogamous. So they'd have less cervical cancer, less lung cancer, less colon cancer, less a lot of cancers. The other thing is, how many of you have heard of the goal to walk 10,000 steps a day? Who's heard of that, right? The Amish try 19,000 steps a day for their men and 14,000 steps for their women. That's a lot of exercise, right? They're getting a lot of good physical labor because they're not using a lot of convenience like appliances. Does that make sense? They're in this horse and buggy or they're walking, etc. But you know what I find very intriguing is, yes, they live much, much different lifestyles. They're in the country, they've got the gardens, they've got all this stuff, right? Less cancer. What is their lifespan? Remember, the average is 79. What's their average? 79. Even though they have much less cancer. Do you know what offsets them? More heart disease. A lot more heart disease. Have you ever eaten an Amish diet or traditional Amish cooking? Right? Pretty rich, isn't it? And here's the bottom line. Even though it's free-range, grass-fed, organic pork, it's still pork. You know what I'm saying? Or meat. That's the concept, is that your body's not designed for that level of cholesterol or saturated fat. And the way I explain it to my patients is like this. If you have a car, can it run on ethanol? Right? A regular car engine. Can it run on ethanol? It can. Well, no, right? Have you ever seen this fuel contains up to 10% ethanol? They can get away with it in small quantities, but did you know that that ethanol worsens the gas mileage and shortens the longevity of the engine? Did you know that? Now they have the stuff as pure unleaded. Have you seen that at some stations? Where there's no ethanol in it. And that's the same thing with you, right? There was a guy who actually went down in a ship several years ago, and he was the only survivor. He had enough oxygen to live, but he survived for a month off Coca-Cola. Did you know that? They discovered him, and they had to hospitalize him. But did he survive? Yes, he did. So just because you can subsist on something does not mean you will thrive on it. Does that make sense? You can eat a lot of different things, but that doesn't mean that's what you were designed for. So the Amish, although they have much, much less cancer, it's very clear in the data, they have a lot more heart disease, and they have zero longevity benefit. Not 1 year better. So it's not just about one thing or the other thing or faith or just diet, right? It's things together, right? All of these have to be together. And the other thing I would say, as a scientist, when you look for the differences in a group, like this group lives longer than this group, don't look at the things that are held in common, look at the unique features. Does that make sense? People say, well, it's their vegetarian diet. Well, the Buddhists are vegetarian, right? Look at the thing that's unique. And I believe that is found here. That is what is going to be, I believe, the next huge field that we're going to come across scientifically, is your longevity is between your ears. Between your ears. But the bottom line is that I believe that the design, when you look at the human body, when you look at the brain, we were designed for the best quality and quantity of life. Otherwise, why would your brain have that much room if you didn't have the potential or have the design to live that long? Does that make sense? This is one of my favorite passages from the ancient literature, the Bible verse. Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in what? Health, just as your soul prospers. You see, the good Lord is not just considered as far as eternal life. He wants us to have better life right here. As Rob said, abundant life. And I would like to send you with this final appeal. I believe that the quest for longevity, the quest for eternal youth, is not vanity. I don't think it's a coincidence that no matter what culture you go to, people want to be young. People want to be strong. There's another interesting aside. Have you ever noticed in pictures, even guys in the back row, they're like this? Have you noticed that? You wondered why people do that? Is it vanity? Is it superficiality? Or were we designed to be taller? Interesting. I don't believe that what you find in our quest for eternal youth is simply superficial. I believe we seek for that because all of us were designed to live forever young. All of us in our very heart of hearts has a desire to live for eternity. Thank you very much.
Can we have a few minutes of question and answer? All right. If
I'll let you make an announcement or whatever you want, or
I can do that at the end.
Okay, perfect.
But if anyone has any questions for Dr. Tim, I have a mic that I can bring to you. We'll just do this for about 5 to 10 minutes or less if there's no one.
Any questions? All right, go for it.
I can speak loud, that's okay.
All right.
Broken sleep. If you still get your 8 hours, but it's broken up by, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're awake for a while, then you go back and you still get 8 hours. Is that still
It's not the same. Certainly it helps you, but it's not the same because the way sleep works, do I have a marker up here? All right, I have a marker. The way sleep works is you go beta, then you go alpha. This is your brainwave pattern, by the way. You go beta, then alpha. Just to give you an idea what alpha is, anyone gotten a massage? That's alpha, right? Anyone ever driving the car and you're kind of distracted, you're like, oh, I just missed my exit. You were alpha. Like you were like zoned, right? You were in the zone. And then you go to stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go to REM. Then you go to 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go to REM. Who knows what REM is? Rapid eye movement, right? That's when you dream, right? So here's the concept. That cycle to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, REM, right? That takes 90 minutes. Have you ever noticed sometimes you'll wake up and you'll feel rested and you sleep longer, then you wake up and then you're like more tired? Have you ever found that? It's because you woke up in stage 3 or 4 instead of REM. When you wake up and you remember your dream like it's super vivid, you woke up in REM. And that's ideally what you want to do, is to complete the cycle and end on REM. Does that make sense? So the concept is that if you're getting things interrupted in stage 3 or 4, that's your deep sleep, you feel miserable. Absolutely miserable. So if you get broken sleep, try to make the breaks roughly 90 minutes. Does that make sense? So get like, okay, I'm going to take a nap now, and then get up in 90 minutes, or get up in 180 minutes. Does that make sense? I don't know if you can predict that. But yeah, if you work at night, if you're a night shift worker, your mortality is higher. The data is very clear on that. You shorten your longevity over time. So you better get like a big differential for that. I personally, just to give you full disclosure, as an ER doc, I've worked many, many nights, many, many weekends. How many nights do I work now? 0. And I have not done nights for 4 years, 5 years. It's just not worth it. I like, when they've offered me, they've begged me to do nights, I say yes, but I'll do it for like $50 an hour more. And they usually back off. They're like, we'll keep you on days. I'm like, thank you, right? Also, I've missed church. Now I don't do it anymore. I actually won't take a shift anymore. I mean, not that it would be wrong for me to do it. It'd be fine, right? What I would do is I'd take the shift and then donate it. It's fine. But now I won't do that anymore. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I'm about more quality rather than quantity. I don't need that money, So anyway, yeah, it does make a difference. It's not as good, but if you can get it in chunks of 90 minutes, that's preferable. And if you can get it earlier in the night, that's preferable. But that's not predictable if you're on call or something. Any other questions? Yes. Right behind you.
I'm not sure which of the blue zones, but I remember reading, I think more than one of them, that depend on or have quite a bit of fermented dairy in some cases, but ferment. And ferment is kind of all the rage now.
You mean like kombucha and stuff like that?
Exactly.
You got to have apple
what
cider
are your
vinegar
thoughts on that?
with the mother, right, or something
yeah,
like
exactly.
that. Yeah. So here's the concept. A lot of that, I believe, is related to probiotics. I believe that's the benefit that people are getting. And the reason why I say that is because in this day and age, we are constantly wiping out our flora, like all the time. And the reason why I say that is you've got antibiotics, not just as pills, but in your soaps now. There's deodorant with antibiotics on it. It's all kinds of stuff. It's crazy, and that wipes out your flora, but that's not necessarily good for you. There is recent data that shows that certain species of mycobacteria, not tuberculosis, different kind of mycobacteria, in the soil, just putting your hands in it reverses depression. Because that's giving you that flora back. So I believe a lot of the benefits you see with like kefir, right, or kombucha or the other fermented like products are a flora issue. I believe that our flora is so whacked out in our society because of all the stuff we nuke it with constantly, that the flora is beneficial. And there is some data that shows that certain sorts of Like kefir, for example, is good for infectious diseases, urinary tract infections. My grandmother gets goat kefir. So, but I wouldn't recommend that just across the board. I mean, she has a catheter, she has a G-tube, so she's like a different situation. She's on antibiotics constantly for infections. So I'm giving her a steady supply of that flora through the kefir, right? Yogurt, there's some benefits to probiotics. So I believe that's the reason, not necessarily because fermentation is good for you, but because it's giving you that benefit back. Any other questions? Yes, there was one back here, and then Pastor Cameron.
Going back to sleep, if
Okay.
if you only get like a short, you said naps are good. If you only get like say 10, 15 minutes, you're
That's-
not going to enter that REM.
No, you'll be in stage 1, but that's not that it's not beneficial
But
at all.
accumulatively,
It's
it's
something.
going to work out.
It's certainly something. I mean, it's not the same. The real restorative areas of sleep are stage 3 and 4. There's no question. Those are when you physically repair yourself. That's very important. Not to say that all the stages aren't important, because REM, anyone know what happens during REM? Memory. Your short-term memory goes to long-term memory. They had a study where they actually woke students up whenever they went into REM, never let them go into REM. They failed everything the next morning. Even though they were rested, they couldn't remember anything. It was just like, so REM is very important too. If you don't ever remember your dreams, you need to do a sleep inventory. If you require an alarm clock in order to get up, like consistently, you need to do a sleep inventory. If you sleep in more than an hour and a half later on the weekend or your days off than when you're typically on your schedule, you're probably sleep deprived. Those are 3 risk factors. Any other questions? All right, right there. No, wait, right in front of you, right next to you. Sorry, Pastor Cameron.
What would you recommend then for a sleep enhancement if you do have interrupted sleep?
So
Is
sleep hygiene, there's many things for sleep hygiene. About 33% of people have some form of insomnia, so this is a very common issue. Sleep hygiene. As much as possible, do nothing but sleep in your bed. Do you understand what I mean? Right now, in this day and age, right, oh man, I got to get off my laptop. It's just so late. And then you go back to bed and you go, what? You're like on the phone. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't read in bed. Don't be on your phone in bed. Don't do anything. Don't even make love in bed. Make love somewhere else, right? So, but I'm just saying, but your mind, does that make sense? Your mind puts itself in a framework where you're at. So if you're doing different things in bed, it's harder for you to go to sleep. Also, don't eat a big meal right before you go to bed, because your GI system has to rest too, right? The other thing is have a kind of tepid bath. That's helpful. Also, meals that are high in tryptophan are helpful as your final meal. Have you heard of melatonin? Have you heard of chamomile? Have you heard of valerian? Those are all natural sleep aids that do not disrupt the sleep cycle. If you take an actual sleeping pill, you don't get the normal sleep cycle. Like if you take a stiff one before you go to bed, alcohol, that's not the same sleep cycle. Anyone had general anesthesia before? Who's had general anesthesia? Where they knock you out. When they knocked you out and you woke up, you're like, oh, I feel so refreshed. Did you feel that way? You felt like something hit you, right? Because a drugged sleep goes through 0 of the stages of sleep. You actually didn't get any restoration at all. So if you use drugs to sleep, you're not getting the same benefit. So I don't personally recommend alcohol to help you sleep. I don't recommend the use of drugs unless you prescribed it by a physician. But I recommend using more natural methods first if you can. Also, they found that if you have if you're sleeping in a cooler room, that helps. Anyone ever went camping before? Mm-hmm. You notice how well you sleep when you camp? I mean, you got fresh air, cooler environment. Maybe you don't. I don't know. Don't sleep next to the guy snoring. That's the problem, right? And the other thing is that if you have total darkness, that also helps you. So get a room darkening shade. I sleep with earplugs when I'm away from home because I just can't afford that. I have to sleep. So those are some suggestions that may help. Yes, Pastor Cameron.
Is there a way to, or maybe has there been a study that has quantified the day of rest that Seventh-day Adventists observe?
Well,
Monday and 7,
I
as far
think-
as the longevity goes.
Here's what I would say. How do you know there's 24 hours in a day? What happens? It's the sun. It's the cycle of the sun. It's a rotation of the earth around its axis, right? How do you know there's 30 days in a month? It's the moon, right? The moon rotates around the earth. How do you know there's 365.25 days in a year? The earth rotates once around the sun. How do you know there's 7 days in a week? Who said the Bible? It's true. She's right. That's the only reason. So the sleep-wake cycle is very clearly established by the data. When you look at the exercise longevity literature, you're 6'1". Coincidence? I don't think so. If you look at someone who doesn't believe, they can be atheist or agnostic, right? Doesn't matter. I'm going to just prove to them the Sabbath, and I'll say, what's your least favorite day of the week? What is it, everyone? Monday. Do you know why it's Monday, though? Not just because you have to go back to work, because you have to work Wednesday, right? You have to work Tuesday. You have to work, right? You have to work all those other days. But here's the proof that you were designed for 6/1, a.k.a. the Sabbath. On Friday night, what does everybody do? They party like a fiend, right? They party like a fiend because they don't have to work the next day. And then Saturday night, what do? They party even harder, right? Because they don't have to work the next day. And then Sunday, what do? No, they take their iPhone and they put it like across the room and then set it up, turn the alarm on. They take another alarm clock, put it under the bed, and then a third alarm clock they put in the next room. And why are they doing all that? Because they got to wake up. And when those alarms go off, why do you feel bad? Why is it miserable Monday? Because the circadian rhythm in your body can adapt and tolerate only 1 day of a different schedule. Did you know that? When you do 2 days, you know what the circadian rhythm does? It now bends itself to that new rhythm. But 1 day is okay. That's not the Bible. That is physiology. That is the very law of your being. Have people tried to change that cycle? Sure they had, right? French Revolution, right? They had the décade, 10-day cycle. You know that, right? 10-day cycle. How did that work? Remember, France was atheist, but they bowed to the God of the Bible because they were built for a 7-day cycle. The décade didn't last. They couldn't escape it. They had to go back to the 7-day cycle, the 6/1. No escape. No escape. So that's what I would say. There's very just straightforward evidence. Now, is it 6/1 for the Sabbath specifically? I'm not aware of any data that looked at that day versus Sunday versus, Islam is Friday, right? I mean, there's different days of rest for different denominations. I don't know if there's anyone who's looked specifically at the day. There's a lot of people who say, well, the spiders don't build their webs on the Sabbath. There's all this stuff. That's not true, actually. Just so you know, that's not data. That's just stories. I'm not aware of that any of that is actually true. So, but the 6/1 rhythm is well established. Not just from the exercise, but just, circadian rhythm, all kinds of stuff. Very, very clear. Any other questions? Yes. Okay.
What about memorizing?
Memorizing? It's interesting. They're finding that the brain is much like your body. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? And this is a real patient that I had. I walked into a room and I looked at this guy's chart and I started speaking to him in Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish, read, write, and speak. I'm not Hispanic, but I learned it later in life. And I spoke to him in Spanish, and his wife interrupted me and said, can you speak to him in English? I said, sure, but I was looking at your last name, and it's from Argentina. She says, that's correct. We are from Argentina, but ever since his stroke, he can only speak English. Isn't that funny? So he had spoken, obviously his native tongue was Spanish, but he learned another language. And they found that learning another language later in life gives you a shield against Alzheimer's. Did you know that? Yes. Use that brain, brother. As far as memorization, I can't give you a study on memorization per se, but the more you challenge that brain, the more powerful it becomes. The more you allow it to grapple with difficult subjects, do things that are hard. There's actually a book that's called Do Hard Things. I like that. It's phenomenal. So I believe that your brain is only going to adapt itself to the activities you give it. One of my favorite individuals, HMS Richards Jr., you guys know who that is? If you look at pictures of him, he has like a huge frontal lobe. Do you see him? And he was razor sharp into his 90s, still going, speaking, a preacher, right? So certainly that gives you something. And there's no doubt that maintaining high brain activity and function is helpful against dementia. All right, why don't we take one more question and then stop? How about that?
So if you never get into REM, like I never dream.
It's not that you never dream, you just don't remember your dreams, sir. I believe you probably dream, otherwise you would have no long-term memory. You would have no learning ability. And I assume you have a learning ability. I'll ask you tomorrow what I talked about, and then we'll see. Sound good?
Just thank you again, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yes.
And just once again, a reminder, he'll be speaking here tomorrow morning for church.